Yep, it starts at noon, so
Yeah. Life is back to normal.
we've got plenty of time.
Let's see. Oh, golly, boy. This is kind of funny. Cleveland Brown, baby. No.
All right, Joe Retigliano.
BLM.
You know Joe Retigliano.
Oh, yeah.
He was a Lutheran. He was a member of the church down in Covington, and I came after he was there, but after he left the Saints, I was wait. Oh, Retigliano.
Peter,
Yeah.
can you use lights back here?
No.
So we're going to study from 1 Kings 22. It's another prophet against prophet deal.
Since I haven't found my hearing aid yet, I'm going to move up.
Yeah.
Here, I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna switch it, and we will get the other one.
Okay.
Just we lost the ways.
Yeah. So who wants to read starting with 1 Kings 22? I think we'll just try to do up to 28. Yeah, it's about this Micaiah guy, and then there's another guy named Jehoshaphat, and there's another guy named Zedekiah,
More different Zedekiah.
a different Zedekiah, right? Yeah, Zedekiah is sort of acting like a false prophet, but it doesn't actually say in here that he's a false prophet. There's 400 false prophets.
Hmm.
And then there's Micaiah. I wonder if that's the same guy as Micah.
Well,
I don't know.
this is hearing aid. I don't know. This is still Israel. So. This is Micaiah. No, Micaiah.
Yeah, it's spelled different.
Yeah. Prophet Micah was a little later, I think, with Isaiah, about the same time as Isaiah.
Oh, so that would have been later?
No, Isaiah was in the 20th, 21st chapter.
Oh, is he? Okay. All right. So it could be the same. I think it's
Okay.
Why don't you read, Peter?
Oh.
So they can hear you that way.
Okay. For 3 years, there was no war between Aram, that's where we get Aramaic, the Aramaic language, Aram and Israel. That's Syria, basically. But in the 3rd year, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, went down to see the king of Israel. And even though that's going north, it's going down because Jerusalem is on a mountain, so he had to go down from the mountain. That's why they say go down sometimes, and it's like, doesn't mean he's going north or south. Israel said to his officers, his officials, don't you know that Ramoth Gilead belongs to us, and yet we are doing nothing to retake it from the king of Aram? So he asked Jehoshaphat, will you go with me to fight against Ramoth Gilead? Jehoshaphat replied to the king of Israel, I am as you are, my people are as your people, my horses as your horses. But Jehoshaphat also said to the king of Israel, first seek the counsel of the Lord. So I went to Israel and I saw Ahab's stables. There's still some ruins that they think are King Ahab's stables. He was quite the military king with a lot of military power. So the king of Israel brought together the prophets, about 400 men, and asked them, shall I go to war against Ramoth Gilead or shall I refrain? So that was the question to the prophets, do we do it or not? And go, they answered, for the Lord will give it into the king's hand. But Jehoshaphat asked, is there not a prophet of the Lord here whom we can inquire of? So does anybody have a theory about why Jehoshaphat said that?
He was a believer.
Yeah. Yeah, and what about these other 400? What did they probably believe in?
These the same guys that ended up in at Mount Carmel
I think it's a
against
different
Elijah?
I think it might be a different 400. I don't know.
Let's see, was that before or after this?
Yeah,
It was Ahab was the king of that one too.
Where are you reading?
we're in chapter 22, First Kings.
Chapter 22.
Thank you.
Now, this was after that, so this was a new the 450 got slaughtered, so he managed to recruit some new guys. To
They must have gotten well paid.
yeah.
You know, like, I don't want to be a farmer, so I'll be a prophet. Yeah, I might get burned up, but whatever.
So
So,
what was your question?
yeah, so who were these 400 dudes, these 400 prophets? Who? They were prophets of Baal.
Baal prophets.
So you're probably Baal. Yeah, that was the popular religion in that neighborhood.
Up in Israel.
Up in Israel, all around. Yeah. So Jehoshaphat said, "Is there not a prophet of the Lord here?" Or I think that might be one of those cases where a prophet of Yahweh in the original.
Mhm.
The king answered Jehoshaphat, "Yeah, there's still one man through whom we can inquire of the Lord, but I hate him because he never prophesies anything good about me, but always bad. He is Micaiah, son of Imlah." Well, you got to admire Ahab a little bit because he's perfectly honest. He's not politically correct there.
Right.
The king should not say that, Jehoshaphat replied. So the king of Israel called one of his officials and said, "Bring Micaiah, son of Imlah, at once." Dressed in their royal robes, the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, were sitting on their thrones at the threshing floor by the entrance of the gate of Samaria, with all the prophets prophesying before them. Now Zedekiah, son of Kenaniah, had made iron horns, and he declared, "This is what the Lord says. With these you will gore the Arameans until they are destroyed." So any comments on that?
Pretty gory.
It's pretty strange.
Gory.
Yeah, like
Go in.
he's wearing these iron horns. It's an object lesson. I guess the prophets did that more back then than they do now. I can't imagine like Billy Graham or somebody like wearing, a computer or whatever.
Well, when we had Lois's prophetic class, she was talking about a lot of the things. There are prophetic actions that people took place, and prophetic things like one of the prophets had to marry a prostitute, and that was something that was going to be a lesson for Israel, things like that, and making these prophetic things like this, and Jeremiah wearing the yoke, for instance. It's prophetic show and tell kind of things. It's sermon illustration.
And they didn't have television back then, so it's a visual.
Why are you wearing, what do? A guy walks in wearing iron horns, you say, "Hey, why are you wearing that iron horn?" And he gets to tell you.
Well, it's because we're going to gore the Arameans until they are destroyed. Thus saith the Lord. And all the other prophets were prophesying the same thing. Attack Ramoth Gilead and be victorious, they said, for the Lord will give it into the king's hand. The messenger who had gone to summon Micaiah said to him, "Look, as one man, the other prophets are predicting success for the king. Let your word agree with theirs and speak favorably." So that's like Old Testament lobbying, right? Just go along to get along.
Cooperating gradually.
Cooperating gradually. Yeah. When he arrived, the king asked him, "Micaiah, shall we go to war against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain?" Attack and be victorious, he answered. For the Lord will give it into the king's hand. No, notice he didn't say which king. You know, I mean, the king said to him, how many times must I make you swear to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord?
That's weird.
The king saw right through it. I think, you know. And Micaiah answered, I saw all Israel scattered on the hills like sheep without a shepherd. And the Lord said, these people have no master. Let each one go home in peace. So that's pretty discouraging.
It's interesting that that's kind of, I don't know if Jesus intended to quote that exact thing, but I mean, that's what he said, you know, the people are like scattered. They're like sheep without a shepherd. You know?
Yeah. And it's implying that maybe the king is going to get killed, but it doesn't actually say that. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, didn't I tell you that he never prophesied anything good about me, but only bad? Micaiah continued, therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne with all the host of heaven, standing around him on his right and on his left. And this is where it gets really strange. And I'd like to hear your opinions on it. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab into attacking Ramoth Gilead and going to his death there? One suggested this and another that. Remember, this is Micaiah's vision of what the Lord had said to him. So one suggested this, another that. Finally, a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord and said, I will entice him. By what means, the Lord said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouths of all his prophets, he said. You will succeed in enticing him, said the Lord. Go and do it. So now the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouths of all these prophets of yours. The Lord has decreed disaster for you. Yeah. So that's, you know, there's a lot, this brings up a lot of theological questions. So is this lying spirit a demon that happens to, you know, maybe demon? At one point in the Bible, it says it's Satan and God were having a discussion about Job. So
same type of thing.
yeah, so it's
Testament.
it's strange. And then when it says put a lying spirit in the mouth of all of his prophets, notice that it doesn't say all my prophets.
Right.
Is that the Lord's prophets that are lying? These prophets of Baal. Then Zedekiah, that's one of the Baal prophets, son of Kenaiah, went up and slapped Micaiah in the face. Another beat down. Which way did the Spirit from the Lord go when he went from me to speak to you? He asked. And that's kind of like what happened to Jesus, where they blindfolded him and beat him in the presence of the king.
Prophesy who slapped you?
Yeah. Bang. Who slapped you? So, you know. Micaiah replied, you will find out on the days you go to hide in an inner room. The king of Israel then ordered, take Micaiah and send him back to Amon, the ruler of our city, and to Joash, the king's son, and say, this is what the king says. Put this fellow in prison and give him nothing but bread and water until I return safely. Micaiah declared, if you ever return safely, the Lord has not spoken through me. Then he said, mark my words, all you people. And outside of this is Ahab gets killed. He tries to hide by dressing up as someone else. But a random arrow finds him and kills him.
Yeah, Peter, look back in 17 a minute.
Yeah.
Where the thing about the sheep without a shepherd, And then it says, the Lord said, these people have no master. So that's probably the indication that Ahab was to die, don't you think? That he was the master of all those people.
Verse 7.
And the prophecy was that they were going to be scattered and they had no master anymore, and so
Right.
they should all go home.
Right. I think that's what is implying there. And then when the king says, you know, you're going to jail and you got to stay there until I come back. And Micaiah says, well, if you ever come back, the Lord didn't speak through me.
And I ain't right.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's,
I was just reading about the revolution in Texas, you know, where they revolted against Santa Anna in Mexico. After the Battle of San Jacinto, nobody could find Santa Anna. It disappeared. And they came across this guy. One author says he was in a cotton dress, and another one said he was just in a loose cotton robe or something like that. And he had a serape on, and he was hiding in the bushes with this blanket over him, and they found him, you know. So disguising yourself in a battle doesn't always work. And they found him, and he told them he was one of Santa Anna's messengers, and that's why he had these letters on him. And so they took him to Sam Houston, and all the Mexican prisoners that they had just captured in the Battle of San Jacinto recognized him and said, "Oh, it's a Santa Ana! Yeah, it's the boss!" And they were cheering him, and so
blew your cover.
yeah, blew his cover like the secret arrow came out of the blue.
I guess we can read the story about Ahab, right? Or do you want to go somewhere else?
Oh, let's read it.
All right. Ahab killed at Ramoth Gilead. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, went up to Ramoth Gilead. King of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, I will enter the battle in disguise, but you wear your royal robes. So the king of Israel, and that's probably the more powerful king, disguised himself and went into battle. Now the king of Aram had ordered his 32 chariot commanders, do not fight with anyone, small or great, except the king of Israel. I mean, there were chariot commanders, but there were other soldiers, but the chariot commanders, their job was kill the king of Israel. When the chariot commanders saw Jehoshaphat, they thought, surely this is the king of Israel. So they turned to attack him, but when Jehoshaphat cried out, the chariot commanders saw that he was not the king of Israel and stopped pursuing him. I mean, they had different accents, right? He cried out, probably, had this like Judean accent as opposed to Israeli accent. So they knew, hey, this isn't the guy. He's got a different accent.
You ever wonder where the term jumping Jehoshaphat came from?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, explain
He
that.
cried out.
He's in a chariot dressed as the king.
Right.
And he's like, I don't want to die.
No.
I mean, right. So he's jumping all over. Exactly. So I mean, the guys that were pursuing him, realized the king's most likely not going to act.
Right.
And Jehoshaphat, mind you, also was the guy that at all costs he wanted peace for years. Yeah. And when this all started, it's, for 3 years, there was no war because Jehoshaphat was like the biggest plague hater there ever was. So these people most likely knew him. So not only accent in the whole works, but just the way the guy acted.
And his voice.
They realized this isn't Ahab.
Yeah. I mean, we know the difference between Peter and Phil's voice with our eyes closed. So.
Right. So, I mean, that's just a side note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think the thing about Jehoshaphat not being at war for 3 years, was that because his nation was strong and firm and nobody went against him? Or you said he was a placater. I don't know it well enough to answer that. But.
Well,
because it's interesting, Ramoth Gilead is right here on the edge of Aram, and so Aram would have gone after them, and I don't know that anybody else came in to fight Judah. Judah was pretty more protected.
So
They were south, right?
they were south.
Yeah.
So who were the true Israelites?
Judah,
Judah.
yeah, the
right.
10 tribes were ripped from Joab, and
So every time that Ahab ever was up against these guys, he got his butt kicked.
yeah,
Like, but you just read all the rest of Kings.
Oh, yeah.
And he got his rear end kicked. So, now all these 400 guys are all like, yeah, we're going to win this one. Right? Well, that didn't work out so good.
Yeah.
So, but Jehoshaphat was like, I don't know, call him Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just, peace at all costs. I mean, he was a super politician.
okay.
Yeah, and it says so. I mean, he's very placating in the beginning of this section, where Jehoshaphat replied to the king of Israel, "I am as you are. My people are as your people. My horses as your horses.
Right.
I'm at your service,
When is
as
Okay.
you wish, master."
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I mean, if you keep reading right there, I mean, the part that I've always found fascinating in this aspect is, one, they're not the same people. I mean,
Yeah.
it's Israel going up against like evil. But after he agrees with the king, what's he say? But then Jehoshaphat, because he wasn't an idiot either, he also says to the king of Israel, oh, maybe we should first seek the counsel of the Lord.
So he's trying to get out of it. Sounds like he was trying to get out of it,
Well, I mean, in ours,
but not take the responsibility himself. Let me lay it
oh,
all.
I'll agree with you all day long. Oh, yeah, blah, blah, yeah, this is great. Yeah, no problem. And then, oh, wait a minute, we forgot to pray and fast about this king.
Yeah. Right. It's kind of, yeah.
So,
Where are you referring to?
22:3. But Jehoshaphat also said to the king of Israel, first, let us seek the counsel of the Lord. That was after Jehoshaphat had already agreed with
Yeah,
the
I'll
king.
go with you. Let's go, let's beat him.
Yeah, my horses, your horses.
But
yeah.
let's ask the Lord first, just in case.
Yeah, maybe we should have started the chapter with let's seek God's face.
Yeah.
Let's call Micaiah, right? And see, let's get his thoughts. But that was after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's in the order that this is translated. Verse 5 begins with the great word but. But Jehoshaphat also said, he said, oh, I'm one with you, but let's check
We
it out.
might have this out of order a little bit,
Yeah, that's good.
right?
Yeah.
And then, also, who's the king married to?
Yeah.
Jezebel.
Jezebel.
Ahab was married to Jezebel.
Ahab was not really a very good king. I mean, historically, he was the worst they ever had.
He was not a free agent. Because Jezebel had a fight.
Well, I mean, he also manipulated Jezebel as well.
Yeah, that's
I mean, and getting, free vineyards and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
and, how do you pronounce it? Micaiah?
Yeah.
Micaiah comes on the scene. He had prophesied.
I would say Micaiah, because like Isaiah is Aya because it's got
Right.
A-I-A. And this just has I-A-H.
Right. So Elijah and Micaiah had gone up against Ahab many times before we were coming here to the end, too, telling him that he's got a problem.
Ahab is kind of like a lot of people nowadays. A lot of men nowadays are sort of passive aggressive, and their work is their whole life. Being king, being a great military power, that was Ahab's whole life, and he would manipulate people in order to achieve his goals.
And he had a wife who was pretty darn good at it too.
Yeah, his wife is manipulated in a different way.
So these 400 false prophets, do you suppose they had anything to do with bending their will like they, in chapter 21, Jezebel says, is this how a king's supposed to act? Come on now.
Yeah.
So she wrote false letters and sealed them with the king's seal, to wind up getting a guy killed under false pretenses so that Ahab could get his vineyard. Right? So all these 400 were under her control as well.
Mm-hmm. That's what the Jezebel spirit is.
Yeah.
So,
So
Ahab was such a piece of whatever.
And he actually thought he could avoid what God said he was going to do. I mean, God said you're going to die. And
Yeah,
he
he
still
thought-
thought he could get around God.
well, yeah,
And it's amazing. I mean, the arrow hit right between the armor.
yeah,
Not only was it a random shot, but it got him in the between the armor, which is
yeah.
like,
It was just an arrow. Most of these people got killed with swords and spears
Yeah.
and things. So, an arrow should have been able to, miss the armor. So the rest of it is, but someone drew his bow at random and hit the king of Israel between the sections of his armor. The king told his chariot driver, "Wheel around and get me out of the fight. I've been wounded." All day long the battle raged, and the king was propped up in his chariot, facing the Arameans. The blood from his wound ran onto the floor of the chariot, and that evening he died. As the sun was setting, a cry. What the heck is that?
It's a woodpecker, don't worry about it. Is that my phone?
Oh, it's a phone.
Oh, geez. Sorry, just to hang up.
it hung up in his
Okay, sorry.
Not just some
Tommy
biscuit
the
salesman.
mechanic. Tommy the mechanic.
My bad.
I just couldn't care what was built with his,
Dave was just some brisket salesman.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill had a guilty look on his face, but that was it.
Not me. How technical I am with this. So where we were was just that, his blood's going to be licked up.
Yeah, yeah,
But nobody did any first aid on him. They
As-
just propped him up and kept fighting.
that's true. That's kind of, you would think they would like staunch the blood or something.
Yeah, maybe they didn't know how.
Well,
Put a tourniquet around
maybe
his
they didn't
neck.
like him either.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, that's possible.
I think that's it. Oh, good. We could just let him.
As the sun was setting, a cry spread through the army. Every man to his town, everyone to his land. And that's just like the prophecy about
Yeah.
the shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
So the king died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried him there. They washed.
in Samaria.
That was the king's.
That's
That was
Oh,
his.
Israel.
right, that was,
Yeah, that's his.
That was the head. That was the capital.
Turned into
Okay.
Israel. Yeah. They buried him there. They washed the chariot at a pool in Samaria where the prostitutes bathed. And the dogs licked up his blood as the word of the Lord had declared. As for the other events of Ahab's reign, including all he did, the palace he built and inlaid with ivory, and the cities he fortified, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Ahab rested with his fathers, and Ahaziah, his son, succeeded him as king.
His body rested. I don't think he rested.
yeah.
so
Yeah,
back in chapter 21.
21.
Okay, so the story is, that Ahab, wanted that vineyard so bad, and Jezebel worked out false letters, and, in verse 16, when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, he got up and went down and took possession of the vineyard. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, the Tishbite. Go down and meet Ahab, the king of Israel, who rules in Samaria. He is now in Naboth's vineyard, where he has gone to take possession of it. Say to him, this is what the Lord says. Have you not murdered a man and seized his property? Then say to him, this is what the Lord says. This place is where dogs will lick up Naboth's blood. Dogs will lick up your blood. That's so the fulfillment of Elijah's prophecy is what we just read here,
Yeah.
is where they're washing out the chariot and the dogs lick up his blood.
Yeah, the vineyard was in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. So they probably washed out the chariots real close to the palace.
And the vineyard was next to it.
Yeah. I mean,
So
that's gotta be.
there's a true prophet.
Mhm.
Well, yeah,
Elijah telling him how he's gonna, the dogs are gonna be looking up your
And it
blood.
definitely wasn't a feel-good prophecy.
yeah, and they brought Naboth to Samaria where he was killed,
Right.
stoned to death. So it could have been the exact same place where the blood of the chariot was. Yeah.
Interesting, eh?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. But I think that's all I had.
Yeah, it's,
Well, the one thing that I always have liked on this is, we know what Micaiah said, but how he said it. And you used it several times this morning with that facetiousness, that sarcasm.
Yeah.
And when he's, Jehoshaphat, the great politician that he was, he, says that, dude, would you just agree with the king this time and his prophets? Would you just please relent this once? So when he comes in, sarcastically saying, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, go. You're going to have victory. You're going to win. Right?
The king will
And
win.
then the king's like, stop it. Tell me the truth. Right? I always have loved the fact that,
yeah,
he was just a smart guy. Just sarcasm dripping from him. So,
Yeah.
What do you mean a smart ass? Well, I didn't want to say that because, it's being recorded. He
That
really
probably
did
didn't
well.
get picked up.
yeah,
And,
okay. He was-
well, we don't want him to think that he was smart. Right.
Yeah, smarty
So-
pants.
I
He
always
could have
did.
been doing it dripping with false, you know how you can do things, say them nicely, but it's obviously you don't mean them, but it's not sarcasm. Over.
Maybe that's, you're trying to be
Irony.
tactful, but you really don't want it to be.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's 400 guys at a conference, and they're all like excited and agreeing with the king and all that stuff. You got a guy puts iron bars or iron spikes on his head, and he's running around like a knucklehead.
Yeah.
You know what? And I hate to say it, but I look at that as, taking place right here, right now, today.
Oh, yeah.
With some of these people that are running around like a bunch of crazy people.
Yeah.
And when you have prevail, ultimately. And then, something else that struck me last week after Bible study, and that I've been pondering all this week, what became of these 400 guys?
Oh, the ones here?
Yeah, these 400, what became of them? Pat, you're really into lineages and ancestry and all that stuff. I like to think that maybe this is total fiction, right? These guys are the ones that ultimately, and their lineage, became the Sadducees and the Pharisees.
Yeah.
The two tribes that were still left behind that ultimately is who killed Christ.
Yeah, but these were Israel guys, not Judah guys.
I understand that.
Yeah,
But what happened to them?
I think they all just,
Scattered?
if I was one of them guys, I would have just kind of put my head down and snuck out the back door.
Well, but then that's exactly what he says they did. They're going to be without a king. He was
So they're going to go
They're all
home.
scattered.
And then the Assyrians come, take over Israel, and they send them all over the world.
Right.
Yeah,
And then what became of those 400 guys?
yeah,
A few of them were still knuckleheads. Had to be.
right.
The guy running around with the iron hat.
Well, what I was saying about the Sadducees and the Pharisees, when we studied Nehemiah, Remember, they came back from Babylon, not from Assyria, but they came from Babylon, and then they were the ones who never agreed to idolatry anymore like they did before, but they became just super law people like that. And they became Pharisees and Sadducees. They were the remnant that returned from Babylon. So it was a different group, I'm pretty sure.
But they still were without a shepherd.
Yeah, these guys.
There were 400 of Jezebel's little
Yeah,
little minions. They did not all just vaporize and go
No.
away.
no, but they probably stayed home and messed up the towns that they were in.
Well, that's my point. You know, they messed up their little towns because we were told they all scattered.
Yeah,
You know, so these 400 people went to their own little local synagogues and created all kinds of havoc.
There is a passage in 2 Kings, chapter 10, where the ministers of Baal are killed. So this is later. And it says, Jehu brought all the people together and said to them, Ahab served Baal a little, Jehu will serve him much. Now summon all the prophets of Baal and see that no one was missing. And he was doing this deceptively to destroy the ministers of Baal. So he killed them all,
Ultimately.
ultimately. So
okay.
that might have been, I don't think that's too long after Ahab.
Was Jehu, he wasn't Ahab's son, was he?
I know, I think he was some military commander that
Oh, yeah.
took over. And yeah, he wasn't a good guy. He killed all the 70 sons of Ahab or something like that. He piled them up in a big pyramid of heads. So, yeah, well, that's all I have.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, that's all I know.
Leave it to David one time years ago. He said, gee, there's more killing in the Bible than there is on TV.
That's true.
I mean,
There's more killing in Chicago.
yeah. Thank you, Peter.
Hey,
Very much.
good stuff, Peter.
Yeah. Currently caffeinated.
Yeah, they get the new, I think it's too lengthy like that. It's not maybe quick buy instead of.
No, I think that's it.
Okay,
Mhm.
I'd like it